How the U.S. Army Evolved from Militia to Global Force. Where are you watching from today? Tell us your city and country in the comments. Before we begin, please subscribe to American Global Force. Like and share this video so we can get this story across a wider audience and help rewrite the false history many people were told. Today we uncover one of the most fascinating transformations in military history. The story of how the United States Army evolved from a small group of determined militia fighters into one of the most powerful military forces the world has ever seen. At first glance, it may seem like a simple story of growth, but the truth is far more surprising, filled with moments of uncertainty, shocking setbacks, bold decisions, and dangerous challenges that could have changed the course of history forever. Long before the United States became a global power, before massive military bases stretched across continents, before aircraft carriers sailed every major ocean, and before advanced technology connected soldiers across the world, there existed only scattered groups of ordinary men willing to defend their homes and communities. These early militias were not professional soldiers. They were farmers, blacksmiths, hunters, traders, craftsmen, and laborers who often had little formal training. They kept weapons close not because they expected glory, but because survival demanded it. In those early days, the land that would eventually become the United States was uncertain and dangerous. Rival colonial powers competed for influence, conflicts with Native American tribes occurred regularly, and local communities often found themselves isolated from distant governments. The militia became the first line of defense. When danger approached, local men gathered quickly, carrying whatever weapons they possessed, forming defensive groups that protected settlements from attack. Yet despite their courage, these militias faced serious limitations. Training was inconsistent. Equipment varied widely. Leadership often depended more on local reputation than military expertise. Against disciplined professional armies, their chances of success appeared slim. Then a challenge emerged that would test these militias beyond anything they had experienced before. Tensions between the American colonies and Great Britain continued growing. Taxes increased. Political disagreements intensified. Many colonists believed their rights were being ignored. What began as frustration slowly transformed into resistance. Resistance became protest. Protest became confrontation. Confrontation eventually moved toward open conflict. When fighting erupted, many observers believed the outcome was already decided. Britain possessed one of the most powerful armies in the world. Its soldiers were trained professionals. Its navy dominated the seas. Its empire stretched across vast regions. Compared to that strength, the colonial militias seemed hopelessly outmatched, yet history often unfolds in unexpected ways. The militias brought advantages that professional armies struggled to match. They understood local terrain. They adapted quickly. They could disappear into forests and countryside when necessary. Most importantly, they believed they were fighting for their homes and future. This determination became a powerful force. As the conflict expanded, leaders realized something critical. Courage alone would not win the war. A more organized military structure was necessary. This realization led to the creation of the Continental Army. Under the leadership of George Washington, the scattered militias began transforming into a more unified fighting force. The process was neither easy nor immediate. Soldiers lacked supplies. Food shortages were common. Uniforms were scarce. Weapons were often inadequate. Disease spread through camps. Harsh winters tested endurance. At times it seemed the entire effort might collapse. Yet Washington understood something many others missed. Building an army required patience. Every setback became a lesson. Every defeat revealed weaknesses that needed correction. Slowly, discipline improved. Training expanded. Organization became stronger. The Continental Army started developing the characteristics of a professional force. Even then, victory remained far from certain. British forces achieved numerous successes. Cities changed hands. Battles were lost. Morale sometimes fell dangerously low. Throughout the colonies, people wondered whether independence was truly possible. Yet the army endured. Small victories inspired confidence. Strategic decisions preserved strength when direct confrontation would have led to disaster. International support eventually arrived, changing the balance of power. What once appeared impossible began looking achievable. When independence was finally secured, the young nation faced a new dilemma. Many citizens feared large standing armies. They associated permanent military forces with tyranny and oppression. As a result, the United States maintained only a relatively small army during its early years, relying heavily on militias for defense. This decision seemed reasonable at first, but the world remained unpredictable. Threats continued emerging from different directions. Frontier conflicts intensified. International rivalries persisted. Military readiness became an ongoing concern. Over time, leaders recognized that a nation could not rely entirely on temporary forces if it hoped to survive in a dangerous world. Gradually, the Army expanded. Professional standards improved. Training became more consistent. Military academies were established to develop skilled officers. One institution would become especially important. West Point began producing leaders who approached warfare with greater discipline and knowledge. These officers would later play crucial roles in shaping the future of the Army. Yet even as improvements occurred, challenges continued appearing unexpectedly. Wars against Native American tribes tested the Army's ability to operate across difficult terrain. Conflicts with the foreign powers revealed weaknesses that still existed. Each campaign exposed problems while also creating opportunities for growth. The Army learned hard lessons about logistics, leadership, communication, and organization. Every experience contributed to its gradual evolution. Then came another major test. The War of 1812 demonstrated both strengths and weaknesses. Some operations succeeded while others ended in embarrassment. The burning of Washington shocked the nation. Many Americans realized their military still required significant improvement. Reforms followed. Leaders studied failures carefully. Better systems were introduced. Training standards rose again. Slowly, the Army became more capable and professional. Yet the most dramatic transformation still lay ahead. As the nation expanded westward, new territories brought fresh opportunities and new dangers. Soldiers found themselves operating across vast distances. Supply lines stretched farther than ever before. Harsh environments challenged endurance. Commanders faced complex situations requiring innovation and adaptability. Through these experiences, the Army continued evolving. It was no longer merely a collection of local militias responding to immediate threats. It was becoming a national institution with growing experience and ambition. Still, nobody could have imagined how dramatically its future would change. Massive conflicts loomed on the horizon. New technologies would revolutionize warfare. Industrial power would transform military capabilities. The United States Army stood at the edge of a new era, one that would push it beyond anything its founders had envisioned. The journey from militia to global force had begun, but the most dangerous chapters were still waiting to unfold. The United States Army entered the 19th century stronger than before, but it was still far from becoming the global force we know today. Many Americans believed the nation would remain protected by its distance from Europe and the vast oceans surrounding it. Yet history has a way of surprising those who think the future is predictable. As the country expanded westward, opportunities multiplied, but so did dangers. New territories meant longer borders, unfamiliar terrain, and growing tensions. Soldiers often found themselves marching through forests, mountains, deserts, and endless plains. Communication remained slow. Supplies could take weeks or months to arrive. A commander could face a crisis and wait days before receiving instructions. Every campaign became a test of endurance and leadership. During these years, the Army continued learning lessons that would shape its future. Officers discovered that victory depended on more than bravery. Planning mattered. Logistics mattered. Discipline mattered. An army that could feed its soldiers, move supplies efficiently, and maintain order often gained advantages before a battle even began. These lessons became deeply embedded in military thinking. Then events emerged that would push the Army into one of the darkest and most important chapters in American history. Political disagreements between northern and southern states intensified year after year. Arguments over slavery, states' rights, and economic interests created deep divisions. Many hoped compromise would prevent disaster. Others feared conflict was becoming unavoidable. Eventually, those fears proved correct. The American Civil War erupted, and the nation suddenly faced a struggle unlike anything it had experienced before. What made the Civil War so extraordinary was not only its scale, but also its impact on military development. Millions of men served. Massive armies maneuvered across huge regions. Railroads transported troops and supplies. Telegraph lines carried information faster than ever before. Factories produced weapons in unprecedented quantities. New technologies changed how battles were fought. The army that entered the war differed dramatically from the army that emerged when the fighting ended. Commanders had to learn rapidly. Mistakes cost thousands of lives. Every major battle provided painful lessons about leadership, tactics, and logistics. Soldiers endured terrible conditions. They marched through mud, slept in harsh weather, and faced constant danger. Yet from this suffering came transformation. The Army developed greater organizational skills. Officers gained valuable experience commanding large forces. Military institutions matured. When the war finally ended, the United States possessed military knowledge far beyond anything it had previously known. The conflict also demonstrated the power of industrial strength. Factories, railroads, and production capabilities became as important as battlefield courage. Future military leaders never forgot this lesson. They understood that modern warfare required more than soldiers. It required a nation capable of supporting them. After the Civil War, however, the Army once again became smaller. Many citizens wanted peace and stability. Attention shifted toward reconstruction and national growth. Yet the military continued serving across expanding territories. Soldiers built forts, protected routes, and maintained order in distant regions. At times, the work seemed routine. At other moments, it became dangerous and unpredictable. While these developments occurred, the world itself was changing rapidly. European powers expanded their influence across Africa and Asia. Industrial technology accelerated. New weapons appeared. Navies grew stronger. Global competition intensified. American leaders began realizing that isolation might not last forever. If the United States wanted to protect its interests, it would eventually need a stronger military capable of operating beyond its borders. This realization grew stronger during the late 19th century. Strategic thinkers argued that national security depended not only on defending the homeland, but also on projecting power when necessary. Naval expansion received significant attention. Military modernization accelerated. Training improved. Planning became more sophisticated. The nation was quietly preparing for a larger role in world affairs, even though many people did not yet recognize it. Then a conflict emerged that changed everything. The Spanish-American War arrived quickly and unexpectedly. Many assumed it would be a limited engagement. Few realized it would become a turning point in American military history. The war demonstrated that the United States could operate beyond its immediate region and influence events far from its shores. American forces fought in Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. The victory was swift, but its consequences were enormous. For the first time, the United States found itself managing overseas territories and maintaining a broader international presence. Suddenly, the Army faced new responsibilities. Soldiers served in distant lands. Commanders dealt with unfamiliar cultures and environments. Logistics became more complex than ever before. The military could no longer think only in continental terms. It had to think globally. This shift transformed military planning. The United States began viewing itself differently. It was no longer merely a nation defending its own territory. It was becoming a power with interests extending far beyond its borders. Yet this new role brought challenges. Maintaining overseas commitments required resources, training, and strategic vision. The Army needed better organization. Professional education expanded. Officers studied military history and modern tactics. They examined foreign armies and learned from international conflicts. Every effort aimed at preparing for a future that seemed increasingly uncertain. As the 20th century approached, technological innovation accelerated. Machine guns, improved artillery, modern communications, and advanced transportation systems began changing warfare. Military leaders understood that future conflicts would differ dramatically from those of earlier generations. The Army invested in modernization, but nobody could fully predict how quickly the world would descend into even larger struggles. Across Europe, alliances formed, rivalries intensified, national ambitions collided. The international system grew increasingly fragile. Many people believed major war remained unlikely. Others sensed danger approaching. The United States watched these developments from across the Atlantic, uncertain about what role it might eventually play. Meanwhile, the Army continued preparing, training, and adapting. Every reform strengthened its foundations. Every lesson increased its capabilities. The transformation from local militia to national military institution was nearly complete. Yet another transformation awaited, one far greater than anything seen before. A global conflict was approaching, one that would test the Army on an unimaginable scale. It would demand millions of soldiers, massive industrial production, advanced logistics, and unprecedented coordination. It would force the United States Army to evolve again, this time from a growing national force into an organization capable of influencing the fate of entire continents. Few could see it coming clearly, but the storm was gathering, and when it finally arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. The storm finally arrived in the form of the First World War. At first, the conflict seemed distant from American shores. Across Europe, massive armies clashed in battles of a scale the world had never witnessed. Trenches stretched for miles. Artillery thundered day and night. Entire regions were transformed into wastelands. Millions of soldiers fought and died in conditions almost impossible to imagine. The United States initially remained outside the conflict, watching events unfold while many citizens hoped the nation could avoid involvement. Yet as the war continued, international pressures increased. Economic interests became entangled. Maritime disputes intensified. Public opinion gradually shifted. Eventually, the decision was made. The United States entered the war. Suddenly, the Army faced a challenge unlike anything in its history. It needed to transform rapidly from a relatively modest force into a massive military organization capable of fighting alongside experienced allies on distant battlefields. Recruitment expanded at extraordinary speed. Training camps appeared across the country. New soldiers arrived by the hundreds of thousands. Officers worked tirelessly to prepare units for combat. Factories increased production. Railroads carried troops and supplies. Every part of the nation became connected to the war effort. The Army learned valuable lessons during this period. Large-scale mobilization required coordination between government, industry, transportation networks, and military leadership. Success depended on organization as much as courage. Although the war ended sooner than many expected, after American forces entered the fight, its impact on the Army was profound. The United States had demonstrated it could raise, equip, train, and deploy a major force overseas. Military leaders carefully studied the experience. They understood future conflicts might demand even greater preparation. Yet after the war ended, many Americans once again desired peace. The Army shrank. Defense spending declined. Citizens hoped the world had learned enough from the devastation to prevent another catastrophe. Unfortunately, history had different plans. During the years that followed, political instability spread across various regions. Economic crises shook nations. New leaders emerged with dangerous ambitions. Military forces expanded in Europe and Asia. Warning signs appeared repeatedly, but many people hoped diplomacy could prevent another global conflict. Then the Second World War erupted and everything changed. This conflict would become the greatest test in the history of the United States Army. The scale was almost beyond comprehension. Entire continents became battlefields. Powerful armies advanced across vast regions. Cities were destroyed. Nations collapsed. Millions of lives hung in the balance. At first, the United States remained outside the war, but the attack on Pearl Harbor transformed the situation overnight. The nation mobilized with extraordinary speed and determination. What followed remains one of the most remarkable military expansions in history. Millions of men joined the armed forces. Training facilities operated around the clock. Factories produced tanks, aircraft, weapons, ammunition, and supplies in astonishing quantities. The Army expanded from a relatively small force into a gigantic organization capable of operating across multiple continents simultaneously. Soldiers fought in North Africa, Europe, the Pacific, and numerous other locations. Logistics became one of the Army's greatest strengths. Supplies crossed oceans. Equipment reached distant battlefields. Troops received support despite enormous distances. Every successful operation required detailed planning. Every victory reflected the efforts of countless individuals working behind the scenes. Military leadership also evolved dramatically. Commanders coordinated massive operations involving hundreds of thousands of troops. Air power, armored warfare, intelligence gathering, and combined operations became increasingly important. The Army learned to integrate different capabilities into unified strategies. These lessons would influence military thinking for generations. Yet victory came at a tremendous cost. Countless soldiers sacrificed their lives. Families endured hardship and uncertainty. Entire communities felt the impact of war. When the conflict finally ended, the world had changed forever. The United States emerged as one of the most powerful nations on Earth. Its army had gained experience operating on a global scale. Its military leaders possessed knowledge accumulated through years of intense conflict. Its industrial capacity had proven unmatched. Yet a new challenge was already emerging. The alliance that had helped defeat common enemies began unraveling. Tensions grew between the United States and the Soviet Union. Political disagreements deepened. Suspicion increased. What followed became known as the Cold War. Unlike previous conflicts, this struggle involved relatively little direct combat between the two major powers. Instead, it became a contest of influence, technology, intelligence, military readiness, and global positioning. For the Army, this era required another transformation. Readiness became a constant priority. Soldiers trained for scenarios that could unfold anywhere in the world. New weapon systems appeared. Nuclear technology introduced unprecedented dangers. Military planners faced the possibility that future wars could be far more destructive than anything previously experienced. The Army responded by modernizing continuously. Research expanded. Advanced equipment entered service. Communication systems improved. Intelligence capabilities grew. Global deployment became an essential part of military planning. American soldiers served in numerous regions, helping support allies and deter potential adversaries. During this period, conflicts such as the Korean War provided further lessons. The Army discovered that even after major victories, maintaining preparedness remained essential. Conditions could change rapidly. Threats could emerge unexpectedly. Flexibility became a critical strength. The military learned to adapt to different environments, climates, and forms of warfare. Meanwhile, technological innovation accelerated. Helicopters, improved vehicles, advanced aircraft, and sophisticated communication systems transformed military operations. Every advancement increased the Army's ability to respond quickly and effectively. The force that had once relied on local militias carrying personal weapons now operated with equipment that earlier generations could scarcely imagine. Yet beneath all the technological progress remained a fundamental truth. The strength of the Army still depended on people. Training, leadership, discipline, and determination continued to matter. Machines could provide advantages, but success ultimately relied on soldiers willing to face uncertainty and danger. As the Cold War intensified, military leaders understood they were operating in a world where a single crisis could have global consequences. The stakes were higher than ever before. The Army stood ready, constantly preparing for the challenges that might never come, while knowing that failure to prepare could prove disastrous. Few realized that another transformation was approaching, one that would push the Army beyond traditional warfare and into an era of rapid deployments, advanced technology, and worldwide influence unlike anything seen before. The evolution from national army to global force was accelerating, and the next chapter would reveal just how far that journey would go. The Cold War continued for decades, creating a world where tension seemed permanent and uncertainty became a daily reality. The United States Army remained on constant alert, prepared to respond to crises that could emerge almost anywhere. Unlike previous eras when threats often appeared clearly on battlefields, this new period was filled with hidden dangers. Intelligence reports, political unrest, regional conflicts, and international rivalries demanded constant attention. Soldiers trained not only for large-scale war, but also for rapid deployment to distant locations. Military planners understood that future conflicts could begin suddenly and spread quickly. The Army therefore focused on mobility, readiness, and flexibility. These priorities would eventually transform it into a force capable of operating across the globe with remarkable speed. During these years, technological advancement accelerated at an astonishing pace. New vehicles entered service. Helicopters became essential tools for transportation and combat. Communication systems improved dramatically. Intelligence gathering became more sophisticated. Satellites began providing information from space. Computers started influencing military planning. Each innovation increased the Army's capabilities. Yet every new advantage also created new challenges. Potential adversaries were modernizing as well. The competition never stopped. Military leaders constantly searched for ways to stay ahead. Then came the Vietnam War, a conflict that tested the Army in ways few had anticipated. Unlike conventional wars involving large armies facing one another across defined fronts, Vietnam presented a different kind of struggle. Dense jungles, difficult terrain, and unconventional tactics complicated operations. Soldiers faced an enemy that often appeared unexpectedly and disappeared just as quickly. Traditional advantages did not always guarantee success. The conflict became one of the most controversial chapters in American military history. Many lessons emerged from the experience. The Army learned the importance of understanding local conditions, culture, and political realities. Military power alone could not solve every challenge. Adaptability became even more important. Leadership evolved. Training methods changed. Doctrine was reassessed. Painful experiences generated valuable insights that would influence future operations for decades. As the Vietnam War ended, many observers questioned the future direction of the Army. Confidence had been shaken. Public trust had declined. Yet the military responded by undertaking significant reforms. Training standards increased. Professional education expanded. Leadership development received greater emphasis. Equipment modernization accelerated. Volunteer service replaced conscription, creating a force composed entirely of individuals who chose military careers. This transformation strengthened professionalism and readiness. Throughout the late 20th century, the Army continued adapting to changing realities. New technologies entered service. Precision weapons improved effectiveness. Communication systems connected units more efficiently than ever before. Advanced training prepared soldiers for increasingly complex missions. Meanwhile, the Cold War remained a defining feature of global politics. Large forces stood ready across Europe and other regions. The possibility of major conflict continued influencing military planning. Then something unexpected happened. The Soviet Union collapsed. For decades, many people had assumed the Cold War would continue indefinitely. Yet almost overnight, the strategic landscape changed. The primary rival that had shaped military planning for generations disappeared. Some believed this development would lead to lasting peace. Others warned that new challenges would soon emerge. The Army suddenly faced important questions. What role would it play in a changing world? How should it prepare for threats that were less predictable than before? What kind of force would be needed in the future? The answers began emerging during the Gulf War. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, an international coalition responded. The United States Army played a central role in the operation. What followed surprised many observers. The coalition achieved victory with remarkable speed. Advanced technology, superior training, detailed planning, and effective coordination demonstrated capabilities that had been refined over decades. The world watched as precision weapons struck targets with extraordinary accuracy. Armored formations moved rapidly. Communication networks connected forces across vast distances. The conflict revealed how dramatically military power had evolved since earlier wars. Yet victory also created new expectations. Allies looked to the United States for leadership. Potential adversaries studied American capabilities carefully. Military influence expanded. The Army increasingly found itself responding to crises beyond traditional battlefields. Peacekeeping missions, humanitarian operations, disaster relief efforts, and stability operations became more common. Soldiers deployed to regions facing conflict, famine, natural disasters, and political instability. These missions required skills extending beyond combat. Negotiation, cooperation, cultural understanding, and patience became valuable qualities alongside traditional military expertise. Then another shocking event changed everything. The attacks of September 11th transformed national security priorities overnight. Thousands of lives were lost. The nation was stunned. Military leaders immediately recognized that a new era had begun. The threats facing the country no longer fit traditional models. Terrorist organizations operated across borders. They often lacked conventional armies, fixed bases, or clear battle lines. Defeating them would require different approaches. The Army adapted once again. Operations expanded into Afghanistan and later Iraq. Soldiers deployed repeatedly. Counterinsurgency strategies became increasingly important. Intelligence gathering, special operations, and cooperation with local partners played major roles. The conflicts proved difficult and often unpredictable. Progress was sometimes slow. Challenges evolved constantly. Yet the Army continued learning and adapting. New technologies enhanced battlefield awareness. Unmanned aircraft provided valuable information. Digital communication improved coordination. Medical advances increased survival rates for wounded personnel. Every challenge generated lessons that influenced future doctrine. Through these experiences, the Army became more experienced in operating across diverse environments. Mountains, deserts, cities, forests, and remote regions all became part of its operational landscape. Global deployment capabilities improved further. Logistics networks grew more sophisticated. Strategic mobility reached levels earlier generations could scarcely imagine. A soldier could be deployed across the world in a fraction of the time required in previous eras. The transformation from militia to global force was becoming increasingly clear. Yet despite all the advances, new uncertainties continued emerging. Cyber threats appeared. Rival powers modernized their militaries. Artificial intelligence began influencing military planning. Space became an increasingly important domain. The future looked both exciting and dangerous. The Army stood at another crossroads, stronger than ever before, yet facing challenges unlike any in its history. The next stage of its evolution would determine whether it could maintain its position in a rapidly changing world where technology, information, and global competition were reshaping the nature of power itself. The United States Army entered the 21st century carrying centuries of experience, sacrifice, victories, failures, and lessons learned through some of the most important events in human history. What began as scattered militia groups defending isolated communities had become one of the most advanced military organizations on Earth. Yet perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this transformation was that it never truly ended. Every generation faced new challenges. Every era demanded adaptation. Every threat forced leaders and soldiers to rethink what military power meant. As technology advanced and the world became more connected, the Army found itself operating in an environment far more complex than anything its founders could have imagined. Modern military strength was no longer measured only by the number of soldiers or weapons. Information became a critical resource. Cybersecurity became essential. Artificial intelligence began influencing planning and decision-making. Satellites provided communication, navigation, and intelligence capabilities that connected forces across continents. The battlefield itself expanded into domains that earlier generations would have considered science fiction. Yet despite these extraordinary changes, one truth remained constant. The Army's greatest strength continued to be its people. Behind every piece of advanced equipment stood trained professionals making decisions under pressure. Behind every successful mission stood teams working together despite uncertainty and risk. Technology could enhance capability, but it could never completely replace human judgment, courage, and leadership. As global competition intensified, new rivalries emerged. Nations invested heavily in military modernization. Advanced missiles, cyber tools, space capabilities, and artificial intelligence systems became increasingly important. Strategic planners recognized that future conflicts might look very different from those of the past. Some battles could occur without traditional front lines. Critical infrastructure could be targeted through computer networks. Information campaigns could influence public opinion across entire societies. The Army responded by continuing its long tradition of adaptation. Training evolved. New doctrines were developed. Partnerships with allies strengthened. Exercises prepared soldiers for scenarios ranging from conventional warfare to humanitarian emergencies. Throughout this period, the Army maintained a global presence. American soldiers served alongside allies in numerous regions. They participated in disaster relief operations after earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes. They helped support international stability during times of crisis. They trained with partner nations and shared expertise developed through generations of experience. This worldwide engagement reflected how far the institution had come since the days when local militias gathered to defend individual settlements. The Army now operated on a scale that connected it directly to global events. Yet with great influence came great responsibility. Military leaders understood that every decision could have consequences reaching far beyond immediate objectives. Strategic patience became important. Cooperation with allies remained essential. Diplomacy and military strength often worked together. Success increasingly depended on understanding political, economic, technological, and cultural factors as well as traditional military considerations. This broader perspective reflected the complexity of the modern world. Looking back across the centuries, the journey appears almost unbelievable. The earliest militia members often lacked uniforms, standardized weapons, formal training, and centralized leadership. They relied heavily on determination and local knowledge. Over time, those humble beginnings evolved into a professional force supported by advanced logistics, sophisticated intelligence systems, global transportation networks, and cutting-edge technology. Every major conflict contributed to this transformation. The Revolutionary War demonstrated the importance of organization and perseverance. The Civil War revealed the power of industrial support and large-scale coordination. The World Wars showed the value of mobilization and international cooperation. The Cold War emphasized readiness, technological innovation, and global strategy. More recent operations highlighted adaptability, precision, and the ability to respond rapidly to emerging threats. Each chapter added new lessons. Each generation built upon the experiences of those who came before. Yet perhaps the most fascinating lesson of all is that history rarely follows a predictable path. At many points, the future of the Army appeared uncertain. Defeats occurred. Mistakes were made. Challenges seemed overwhelming. Critics questioned decisions. Resources were limited. Success was never guaranteed. What allowed the institution to endure was its willingness to learn, adapt, and improve. This ability to evolve became one of its defining characteristics. It transformed setbacks into opportunities for growth. It turned lessons into doctrine. It converted experience into expertise. As the future unfolds, new questions continue emerging. How will artificial intelligence influence military operations? What role will cyber warfare play in future conflicts? How important will space become as a strategic domain? How will military organizations balance technological advancement with the human qualities that remain essential for success? No one can answer these questions with complete certainty. What history suggests, however, is that the United States Army will continue adapting just as it has for generations. The story of its evolution is not simply a military story. It is also a story about innovation, resilience, leadership, and the ability of institutions to change in response to new realities. From local militia units protecting frontier settlements to a global force capable of operating anywhere in the world, the journey has been extraordinary. It has shaped nations, influenced world events, and affected countless lives. Whether viewed through the lens of military history, political development, technological progress, or global affairs, the transformation remains one of the most remarkable stories ever told. The Army's evolution reflects broader themes that continue shaping the modern world, including the relationship between security and freedom, the balance between preparedness and peace, and the constant challenge of adapting to change. Those themes remain as relevant today